We have got a bit of an odd duck of a field for this weekend in PGA DFS. Don't look at me like that. How dare you? We barely just started the podcast. You're just off vacation. That's a real phrase. That's an actual saying. Yes, it's an odd duck. Like duck, duck, gray duck.
Minnesota, maybe?
No, duck, duck, gray duck. It's a very normal thing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
just like Bagel.
Odd duck. Just go back on vacation. Anyway, odd duck of a field this week in PGA DFS because we have legitimate studs, actually good golfers at the top end of this field. And that makes it pretty fun, but there is a very, very steep drop off at a certain point. Now our job is to decide, how do we navigate around that for PGA DFS? What does it do for roster construction? How do we best tailor our lineups to this specific field? Because it's not going to be easy. So let's dive in and get you set for the RBC Canadian Open. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here, unfortunately, once again, by Brandon Gadula. He is the senior managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, I'm not going to say welcome back. I'm going to say you are back. It's kind of like the happy birthday with the period at the end. You are back. How was your vacation?
It was good. I never really classify the getaways with the wife as vacations because we do a bunch of hiking and sleeping in the car and getting up at like sunrise. So not as, we had some more hotels. We actually watched Game 7 of the Heat Celtics in a parking lot, which was cool because if we went back to our campsite, we would not have had any internet access. Okay. But yeah, it was nice to get away. Not so nice to come back to a field quite like this because, like you said, we have some great. When I saw the field at the top and I saw the odds, I was like, okay, this will be a good one. And then, boy, the bottom falls out real quick.
Yeah, and it's not like anything else happened on the PGA Tour or / in the golf world while you were gone either, coming back to truly delightful discourse across the board.
Yeah, that was one thing I knew that I was going to sort of miss out on and come back and see where we are. And got a lot of news, not really something that we're here to discuss, but a lot of interesting decisions.
Yep. A lot of interesting stuff for sure. And we're going to be feeling the ripple effects of that for a while. But hey, we're here to talk about the PGA Tour because it's still kicking. They're offering DFS for that. They're not offering it for other tours. So we'll talk about that. Try to win some money off of that, starting with the RBC Canadian Open, which we'll break down in just 1 second. But first, the NBA Finals are here. You can play a free daily fantasy challenge with a $10,000 prize pool. It is the Body Armor Inside Edge challenge, and it's easy to play. You set your 5-player lineup and stay under the salary cap, following the FanDuel rules with your MVP, your star, and the pro position. You also get 2 utility slots. If your team scores enough fantasy points, you will be eligible to win part of the $10,000 prize pool. The Body Armor Inside Edge contest is for Game 3 of the series, which is coming up on Wednesday, so make sure to enter before then. You can sign up for the free contest at FanDuel.com/league/Body Armor. Again, that's FanDuel.com/league/Body Armor. Make sure to play this free DFS contest for your chance to win $10,000.
Who's your pick for Game 3? I
don't care. I feel bad when
I knew you didn't care. I just wanted to see how you would react. I thought maybe you'd throw out the Celtics are gonna, but you just went with I don't care, which is, yeah. I respect it because that's
we have people uncovering the spread and they give these amazing insights, and I'm like, okay, cool. Here's maybe a pertinent follow up. Might be stupid. I just feel bad that they give amazing stuff, and I'm like, I don't know NBA. I'm rooting for the Celtics because we had Drew Dinsick on our show, and he has money tied into the Celtics, and I want him to do well. So I lived in Boston for a while, and I found people who are Boston sports fans to be decently annoying. So I kind of don't want to root for it, and I like Steph, but I don't know.
Well,
I love Boston people, by the way. I just don't like Boston sports fans.
But yeah, look, I think it's safe to say, as someone who no longer has any affiliations or interest in rooting for a single team, all fandom is can lead you to have some blinders on and be a little bit to overbearing. So
yeah.
So it's not about that.
Who am I rooting for, Brandon? Tell me, who should I root for in this thing?
In the finals?
Yeah.
I'm rooting for Boston.
Okay, so hardcore Boston fan here, as I always have been. Never rooted against any Boston sports team, especially not when I was sending slanderous tweets about Tom Brady when I was like, whatever, 18 or whatever. So, never rooted against him in my life. I didn't have Twitter when I was 18. That's a lie. 19.
Yeah. Well, the thing for me, and nobody's going to care about this if they're listening for PGA DFS, but it'll be the final thing. I grew up playing basketball. It's the sport I know most. I never like how the Warriors' demeanor when they're down one is they're very stoic and not very they don't look like they're very competitive sometimes, but as soon as they're up by like 7 points and hit another 3, then it's like it's a bit front runnery for me. And if playing against people like that, it annoys me. So I think that's the energy I'm getting from.
So you don't want to play at like the local Y with Draymond. That's not your thing you're looking for.
Well, it's like I see Steph hit a 3 to like cut it to 1, and he runs down a court, and then he hits a 3 to go up like 9, and then they're like throwing a dance party. And I identify with like a Jaylen Brown in this series. So that's kind of who I'm clinging to most.
Yes, the person who I know the best is Jaylen Brown. I've used in DFS several times. That's how I know these teams. It's through DFS. So
that's why I like Xander Schauffele in DFS. I like Patrick Cantlay, the most boring people that nobody else has interest in. So it's just the people I sort of identify with a little bit more. That's who I gravitate toward, because I'm not a fan of teams. I'm a fan of players now. It's a lot better. It's a lot better to be that way.
I agree. Valtteri Bottas. Just root for Bottas, and that everything else is fine. Only basketball I played was snow rugby basketball, which was no dribbling basketball played with a mini basketball in the snow, and concussions were had. So, that's my experience of basketball.
Were you on the Grey Ducks?
No, there was no teams. It was every person for themselves. It's a violent sport.
I think people aren't even going to get to the course breakdown of this show and just turn it off. So,
but you know what? We will. Let's dive into the course breakdown.
We never do this.
We never derailed. Let's talk about the course breakdown here for the RBC Canadian Open. It is at St. George's Golf and Country Club, 7,014 yards. It is a par 70. It is not hosted a PGA Tour event since 2010. So no course history to look at for this week. We do have 156 golfers in the field. The top 65 plus ties will make the cut after the first 2 rounds. So Brandon, we don't have a lot of data at this course. What do we know about it from the limited data we do have?
So this is a really, really tough one, because my advice based on something like this is not to overreact, but it's also hard not to cling to the few things that we do know about and try to get an advantage that way. So trying to walk that line between figuring out what happened in 2010 and how we can use that. But it is worth noting that there has been a renovation here by Tom Doak and Ian Andrew in 2014. So even since 2010, there's been some renovation here. It's basically been restoring all the greens to the original profiles is the note here, and the GCSAA tournament fact sheet, which is just always an invaluable resource. So one thing I'll say, or a few things I can say for sure, is that we know it's a shorter par 70. It's about 200 yards shorter than the average par 70 on the PGA Tour, with narrowish fairways if you look at things from a fairway acre per yardage standpoint. And then the green size. I didn't have this when I first published my helper on numberFire, and then I saw it this morning. But the green size, according to the GCSAA, an average of 4,000 square feet. PGA Tour average is 6,000 square feet. So we're looking at smaller greens. These are going to be some of the smaller greens we have, and they're going to undulate, have some false fronts. So that's going to put an emphasis for me on iron play, but also getting up and down, strokes gained around the green. For one of those tests where, like, if you do miss it, you have to get up and down. I don't think we're going to see a 20 under birdie fest. The winning score in 2010 was 14 under by one Carl Pedersen. So I think we're looking in that like 15 under range, maybe close to like 16, 17 under, because this is a pretty top heavy field with some guys who can pick it apart, but definitely not something that we're looking at, 25 under to win, but also probably not like 5 under or anything like that. It's not gonna be that difficult of a test. But within that 2010 year, we pretty much saw a de-emphasis in strokes gained off the tee. It was more about your approach play and your putting, but also getting up and down, getting out of trouble. Pedersen, whenever he won, he ranked 3rd in strokes gained putting, 14th in strokes gained tee to green, despite ranking 20th or worse among the cut makers in all 3 of the individual stats. So it wasn't that he had, the best irons in the field or the best wedge play and got a lot of luck around the greens. It was sort of a balanced tee to green performance and a good putting showing. And so for me, what the underlying data really shows is that we can kind of overlook strokes gained off the tee. If you had to pick one stat between distance and accuracy, it does seem like it leans a little bit more toward accuracy because of the narrow fairways, the rough, a little bit longer than tour average, about 3.5 inches. So I think you can kind of make a profile of hit fairways, hit good irons, putt well. But if whenever you do miss the greens inevitably because they're small and they have the undulations, the false fronts, get up and down. So does that sound like an all-around test? It sure does. That's why some of these superstars at the top of the field, we got to take a long look at because they're going to be very tempting. But then we have to figure out how that impacts the rest of our lineup. Because if you roster 2 superstars, you're going to be digging around for a lot of value that may not necessarily exist. So again, my key stats, really strokes gained approach, strokes gained putting, and strokes gained around the green for this week.
So you mentioned the very, very small greens. And obviously the biggest implication of that is what you discussed, where it is going to put a big emphasis on approach so you can actually stick it on the greens when and around the green play. But what does it do for putting? Does it downplay putting? Does it keep things pretty neutral because it doesn't really matter that much? Does it impact your view of putting in terms of importance when the greens are smaller?
It's less about the distance of the putting or of like your first putt. If you have larger greens, you can make a case probably to look more at like lag putting from like 20, 25 plus feet. But for me, what's really standing out is the undulation and being able to read greens. I think that, this is a stat that you can't really, there is no stat for green reading ability. But you would have to think that golfers who have good long-term strokes gained putting data are the better green readers than those who have the weaker numbers because, I'm sure if you're listening to this, you've at least played some putt golf, but probably been out there and golfed a few rounds. The margin of error for putting obviously very small in terms of making and missing, but what really separates some of the better golfers, the better putters that you might play with, is being able to read those greens. Everyone can sort of hit a putt unless you're just, hammering it, 20 feet past the hole, but that's a different conversation. So I think for me, it's less about the green size and more about the undulation. But I am putting quite an emphasis on strokes gained putting for this week. And of course, for me, that'll look more at the regression, the underlying data, which I'll tweet about later today.
So are you looking at overall putting? Because I have overall putting kind of because of I read your stuff. I have overall putting in my thing versus bentgrass putting specifically. Is that okay? Or would you stick to bentgrass splits?
I think that's okay. I think you can factor in bentgrass putting. I mean, full disclosure, anytime I say like strokes gained putting on bentgrass is a key stat, I blend overall putting and bentgrass putting because, we're still looking at a relatively smaller sample this season with bentgrass putting. So if you're looking at like current up-to-date bentgrass putting, it's still going to be a smaller sample. If you dig back too far, are these guys putting the same way? So honestly, for me, it comes down to, I think putting splits on surface matter, but they're never more important than overall performance long-term.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Okay, so we're going to dive into the current form section now, talking about golfers who are on a heater entering this event, and that's because there's no course history to discuss outside of that 2010 one. So Brandon, let's start things off here with Matt Fitzpatrick, potentially one of the PGA Tour members to play here most recently. Played here about a month before he enrolled at the greatest university on the planet, Northwestern University. What do you say with Matty Fitz here recently at 11-3 for this week?
Yeah, so we don't have course history, but if we did, we would talk Fitzpatrick because he won the 2013 US Am here. That would be the thing that everyone's talking about. I'm sure we'll hear this more throughout the week if you tune into other coverage, read more articles. But he also fits from
Bad.
a
Again,
current
please go back on vacation. Everyone is begging you, specifically me.
from a current form standpoint. Despite a missed cut at Memorial, your current form is not your last event. It's not predictive of much at all, unless you think it's the downfall of a golfer who missed a cut, or that a golfer who had a good showing will never have a bad showing again. So one event is not enough. But in 2022, then Fitzpatrick has played 11 events. He has 3 missed cuts. The Players, the RBC Heritage, and Memorial. In those, he lost at least 2.9 strokes putting, but maintained at least 1.2 strokes tee to green in those. So it wasn't the tee to green, it was the putter that let him down and led to the missed cut. Last week at Memorial, Fitzpatrick gained 6.5 strokes tee to green, according to Fantasy National, but lost 7.6 putting, which is, I believe, his worst since as far back as their database goes, 2012 or 2013 at Fantasy National. His second worst also was at Memorial, so maybe it's just something about that course that doesn't really fit his eye with the greens. But in those 11 events otherwise, he has 5 top 10s. And over the past 3 months, he ranks 4th in Data Golf's true strokes gained tee to green metric. We still think of Fitzpatrick probably as a great putter, but his iron play, his ball striking has gotten a lot better recently. There's a lot to like about him, despite not having like the true star power that you'll see at the top with Scotty Scheffler, Justin Thomas, Rory McIlroy, Sam Burns, Cam Smith. You could maybe say Shane Lowry's in that bucket, at the bottom of that bucket, but then you get to Fitz and you're like, it's not quite the same as those guys. So I think he's a really fascinating case because we have, at worst, we have 5 studs at the top, and we got to figure out what we want to do with them. But a big part of that answering that question is how we value the second tier. And you're actually going to talk about someone else in that second tier. So I say, you talked to me about Tony Finau. Was that Rosa knows? Rosa knows.
She loves Finau and Fitz. So she was very excited that we're talking about them right now. So let's talk about Finau here as well. And then dovetail that into the discussion you discussed about the second tier. And I do think there's a fall off at a certain point. There are probably actually 2 tiers. Like the top 5 you mentioned, top 5 or 6 you mentioned, and then a second fall off at some point. The question is whether Tony Finau is before or after that fall off. His salary is $11,000, which does seem high, but some good finishes recently. Finau was runner-up at the Mexico Open. He was 4th at the Charles Schwab. What?
I was sipping my coffee and I lost my train of thought a little bit, and it sounded like you said Tony Finau's salary is $7,000. And that's high. And I was like, he's not that bad yet, but I know people do want to write him off. So,
I mean, I did before the PGA Championship. He finished 30th there. So, actually golfed pretty well. Tough field there. But the 2 top 5s for Finau are the only top 10 finishes that he's had in a full field since the swing season started. So September, like it's been a hot second. The short game numbers have been getting better and they contributed to the good finishes, but obviously not his strength. He is still not a guy I'm like specifically targeting at, short game type courses. So I'm a bit hesitant on Finau. I like that. I like Fitz a lot more. I know that at 11-3. I think Finau's not quite someone I'm comfortable with. I don't think that the fall off occurs at him though. I think the Tyrrell Hatton at 10-9 is still interesting. I can definitely be okay with that. HV3 at 10-4, I don't mind. So even though I think Finau is before the second fall off occurs, he's probably still not going to be in my lineups. Where are you at on Finau? How do you view the second tier?
Yeah, the second tier is a real hit or miss for me. We have, I think we'd probably say like 10,000 to 11.3, which sounds like a big range, but that's like 10 golfers in that range. So it's not that many golfers overall. But I think with Finau, the real question comes with how are you factoring in off the tee play? Do you think that it won't matter as much like back in 2010, or do you think that the game has changed, that this course has changed enough where having a lot of distance, being able to gain a lot of strokes off the tee is going to be relevant? For me, I'm kind of on the fence about it, and I'm just kind of taking a stand here because we don't know a whole lot and saying I'd rather bump up the golfers who typically don't gain strokes off the tee or as many,
right,
or as consistently, because those golfers in theory should have worse performances at courses where that matters more. Therefore, they have lower salaries for this week. And someone who jumps out to me in that regard is Tyrrell Hatton, who isn't bad off the tee, but that's not his forte. It's his sort of weakest of the 4 strokes gained stats. So if you give me like Finau versus Hatton straight up, I'm going to go with Hatton. Absolutely. I would go with Fitz over Finau. I would go Corey Connors over Tony Finau most likely as well. The difference there, Connors worse with the wedge game than Finau. Finau's pretty good with his wedges still, just not the putter. But the big difference there is the driving accuracy. We know Finau's, that's not his strength. It's not Hatton's strength either. To be clear, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite in that regard. But Connor's going to hit every fairway basically. Fitzpatrick going to hit every fairway. So between those 4, between 10-9 and 11-3, I do have Tony Finau ranked last personally.
I would as well. And it's partly because I like those guys, but also partly because I'm still skeptical of Finau. I think it's both things contributing here for me. So I'm okay being lower on him. And I think that actually for me, despite the fact that I like Fitz a lot and I like Hatton a lot, I do kind of want to jam in 2 of the top 6 or whatever it is, wherever Lowry is. Lowry is 6th. So 6th. I do want 2 of the top 6, I think, because I do think there is like, I put Fitz above Hatton. I think he's actually a tier above him for me personally. So a tier above Tyrrell. Yeah. Haha. He fits a tier above Tyrrell. Fitz a tier above Tyrrell. Anyway. I think that I might consider some Fitz in there, but I do think that for me, there are benefits to jamming in 2 of those top 6. I know it will leave me a bit hamstrung elsewhere, but I'm okay with that just because I really want to get there this week.
Yeah, I really like Lowry this week, but I went with Hatton as a primary play over him just due to the savings of 500. And 500 goes a long way because as we're about to get into some value range options, or at least one value range option, like we're talking about where does the drop off occur at the top, and we can nitpick that. Like, is it before or after Finau, that kind of stuff. But there's a drop off that occurs a little bit lower than that. It might be after Harold Varner at 10,400.
I think so.
But after that, we're
Chris
really
Kirk, I would say, is for me.
Yeah. I could view it as like I could view it as like he's the guy below 10-4, so it's really not like
the one guy. It's not a tier, it's just he's the guy hanging out by himself.
So let's jump into Adam Long here at 86, because we got to figure out, I know we spent some time on the NBA, but this one's really about roster construction this week and how the field's shaking out. So Adam Long can be rostered at a salary of 8,600, and that's enticing because the bottom of this field is just really bad. And so if you're looking for flawless form at a value price, you're not going to find that. That is the case for Adam Long, who has missed 6 of 14 cuts in 2022. But that does include 4 top 35s and 2 top 15s in his past 6 starts, the other 2 being missed cuts. But even with a lot of missed cuts in his profile, Data Golf has him ranked 16th in this field in true strokes gained over the past 3 months. That's not just tee to green, that factors in putting. That's going to sort of ding you for overall bad performances that obviously lead to some sort of a missed cut. Of course, we don't necessarily look into a missed cut and see if it's on the number. We treat them all the same. That's really not how we should do it. There probably should be a stat of like, when you miss a cut, how much did you miss it by? That'll get smoothed out over a larger sample if you're looking at overall data anyway, so it's not really something that I'm trying to look into. But I would imagine that if the overall strokes gained is that good, he hasn't really have like top 3 finishes, but just top 35s, top 15s, like probably golfing pretty well. He can find fairways, which I think, again, is the right play off of the tee this week, looking a little bit more at accuracy than just distance. It's a very, very good putter, so that might be like the right value recipe. A lot of guys are going to miss greens anyway. That's not to say you should neglect iron play. His iron play is okay. It's not great. It's a little bit below field average over the past year, but if you're going to miss fairways, if you're going to miss the greens and you can get up and down, maybe make those par saving putts, that could be enough for a value salary. So my question to you is, I think we're both okay with Adam Long. Are you seeing any other like can't miss values probably below Chris Kirk? Because if not, like, what does this mean for roster construction for you then?
So I'm not looking for can't miss values. I'm looking for can hit values. Like that's what I want. And like, it's tough to find that. So I think that to me is the biggest indication of where this field is, where there aren't a lot of value plays I feel good about either from a floor or ceiling perspective, much less both. I think Long is solid. I'm on board with him, but like I would probably put Mark Hubbard in like that can hit bucket, but like it's not a lot of guys who are there. So that's what's tough for me. And that's why, to me, I have this conflict because I do want to jam in 2 of the top 6, but also if I do that, like let's say hypothetically, I just put in Scotty Scheffler and Cam Smith, I'm at 90-75 left. I could put in Long and Hubbard, but I'm still at 95 left for my final 2 slots, which means either putting in a third value play to get back up to the Kirk or HV3 level, or I'm putting in 2 mid-range guys, which I don't want to do. So I think that the way I view it is a bit counterthetical to the way we typically view things, where you might think traditionally cash game lineup more balanced. I think that for me, the cash game build, well, sorry, you might think that you want to jam in like the top end guys for cash games. I think I want to lower down that salary more in cash games. So I'm more okay with a Tyrrell Hatton for a cash game because I just need to save and avoid that range. I'm more okay with a Matty Fitz in the cash game because I need to avoid that lower end range. Whereas for tournaments, I will take shots at a Scheffler Smith lineup because I think that the upside they bring is really, really good. And I'm okay taking more swipes at the guys like Long, Hubbard, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I think to me, it's a bit different than I typically would have viewed it, where like, oh, you just go with the Scheffler type guys in cash games. I think I might be more balanced in cash games this week just to avoid being too heavily in that mid range, which is not a place I want to be for cash games this week.
Yeah. So in building my head-to-head lineup against you, I'll just say I've started out with Cam Smith and Tyrrell Hatton.
Yep.
And I feel like those are the 2 best value studs that we have this week. I threw in Adam Long. And then I was able to get back up to with one other value play, not even in the 8,000 range, so just one golfer in the 8,000 range with Adam Long. I was able to get back up to that Kirk level, and I feel pretty solid with that kind of lineup for a head-to-head game. The issue that you brought up with upside is we're not going to get a whole lot of upside from the value plays. Like this could be won by someone a little bit strange because we do have, let's call it 10 really strong golfers at the top of the field. But in my win sims, and I seem to be a little bit higher on the top guys than some other models I've seen, but I'm at about 53 to 54% win equity from just the top 5 alone. These guys are a lot better than the rest of the field. And I don't think that this is such an event where it's going to be like totally random.
Do you think it's due to like course uncertainty? Like, is there more variance baked in with it being like a course we don't have a lot of data, or what would lead to that, do you think?
That's definitely possible. It's also possible that I just overrate the better golfers because I factor in recency, and we have a lot of very recent good performers like Scotty Scheffler, JT, obviously. Rory's golfing really well. Sam Burns, a lot of wins there. Cam Smith. So it could be that I factor in that recency a bit too much, but it's it's historically worked well enough for me. So I'm not really changing that. It's just okay. We have about, let's call it even 50% of the time one of the top 5 wins. You want access to that in tournaments. So I think I'm with you. We're a little bit more balanced, like a Cam Smith, Tyrrell Hatton start, and like a head-to-head, a double up sort of format. But being okay, just having some low upside guys in the value range just to get access to where the upside is, and that really does seem like it's the top 5 or 6. Because I would not be surprised at all if Shane Lowry wins this week. So
yeah,
he's very interesting to me as well.
I agree with all that. Okay, so we're on the same page there. Let's talk about Chris Kirk, the guy in mid-range we actually do like, or at least I like for this week. He's 98. He did cool off this past week, finished 53rd. He also finally got his salary jacked up to 98, but I think he's still worth that personally. Kirk's rough, quote-unquote rough outing last week was mostly due to approach. He lost 5.1 strokes there, but his events before that had been pretty solid in that arena. It was the first time Kirk had lost strokes in approach since the American Express back in January. You've shown that we should ignore one event blips, so I'm inclined to just do that here with Kirk. He ranks 25th in approach the past 50 rounds. He is second around the green, 76th in overall putting. Kirk is 11th in Data Golf's true strokes gained the past 6 months, but ranks 19th in salary. So I don't think that we should feel too bad about Chris Kirk, despite the increased salary, despite, a non-stellar event last week. I think he is kind of that one guy in that range I like. Where are you at a Chris Kirk this week at 98?
Yeah, love Chris Kirk. He's going to be a bit of an anchor play because he does work as, if he's my third highest salaried golfer because I go a little bit top heavy, I'm fine with that. If I'm just getting back up to him, even in a more balanced build, I like that. And yes, one event's worth of data for approach play. While one event of, if you take the 4 granular strokes gain stats, one event's worth of approach data is more predictive than off the tee or around the green or putting, but still not predictive enough. You need about at least 3 straight events of like bad approach play to start to worry. We don't see that. We see a lot better approach play from Kirk, which is why we talk about him a lot. The around the green play has been pretty solid as well. So I got no issues with Kirk. I think he's a bona fide sort of lock for a cash game lineup for me this week.
Same for me here, just because I think he's under salary, and that's what I want, is to stockpile guys who are under salaried in cash games, and he fits for that for sure. So Kirk works, fits, and Tyrrell tears. That's what we got here so far for this week. Let's dive into bookmaker odds for the RBC Canadian Open, where Scotty Scheffler is favorite to win at FanDuel Sportsbook. He is plus 850. Justin Thomas and Rory McIlroy are both plus 950. Cam Smith is 11-1 before we get to Sam Burns at 14-1. Matt Fitzpatrick and Shane Lowry both 18-1, followed by Corey Connors at 20-1. Tony Finau is 25-1 with Tyrrell Hatton at 27-1 to round out the top group. So let's just finalize this roster construction discussion right now. Final thoughts for you and how you want to view things from a roster construction perspective, given the wonkiness of this field for this week.
So in our head-to-head, I feel confident saying I'm starting my lineup with Cam Smith and Tyrrell Hatton. You talked about wanting to find the golfers who are undersalaried most. I think it's probably those two. Cam Smith was 15-1, which we'll get into, and I was surprised by that because I didn't see why like Sam Burns would be a better favorite than Cam Smith.
When you were gone last week, I had to do the quick pick segment for you, the betting segment for social. I did Cam Smith, and I was pretty excited after Friday, and then was less excited as the weekend went along.
Yeah, I also would have talked up Cam Smith. I talked him up this week on quick picks, as well as Hatton and Harold Varner, and all of their odds just shortened. So, I guess it's good, but
yeah, very actionable content when it comes out later this week, and the odds have all moved. Love making betting content that is relevant for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the struggle. But yes, roster construction. I'm going a little bit more like a modified balanced, where I'm going lower in the tier 1 and tier 2 for my studs. And then, yes, playing some values, but not like golfers in the 7,000 range or multiple or three 8,000 guys. Like, that's not the way I'm going. That's more for tournaments. Whenever I say, look, I think that Scotty Scheffler is going to win this week, or I think JT is going to win this week, or, I mean, we haven't even really talked about Rory at all. Right. Like Rory Sabatini, he could definitely come out and win this week.
Well, I heard the other one's brainwashed, so I don't know. Should we use him if he's brainwashed? Or is it better if he's brainwashed? I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe he's he's Rory McIlroy. And he's remembered that, so he's playing some good golf now. But so for tournaments, I do think that we have to be more cognizant of the upside, and probably, I guess maybe a better way to say it is like the downside of not having heavy exposure or some exposure to the studs. I know the studs are going to get exposure. So now my question is this the kind of week where you're saying, okay, I got 10 lineups. I'm going to figure out we'll throw Shane Lowry in there in the mix. Say, I want to build around, I think you said 2 of the 6 was kind of your sweet spot this week. I like that. But is this the kind of week where you're saying, okay, I'll play Adam Long and maybe 1 or 2 or 3, 4 other values, but then I want to rotate in the studs because I don't know who among the studs is going to hit this week? Or are you saying, look, I got a good feeling about Rory and Cam Smith this week. They're the guys I'm going to anchor my lineups around, and then I'm going to shuffle in value plays because I don't have a good feel. Which are you more likely to do this week?
Probably commit to the value plays, which is kind of scary, but like, I think it's a very I do a lot of NASCAR, and it's a NASCAR type event where I want to have combinations of studs. Like I want to have, okay, I think that Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney dominate this race in this lineup, and then rotate through the value plays, but then keep them being the core. Next one, it's Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, et cetera, et cetera. For this one, I think that it's kind of what you said, where I rotate through those guys and just have exposure to all 6. But I would say, like, if you're doing limited lineups, you're doing like 3 lineups, then I would say just pick your studs. And I would say I have a bit more of an inclination towards the bottom end of that top tier than I did initially, because I do want those salary savings. So like, I love Scheffler. Scheffler is in my player picks right now. I'm going to change that because I think that the value of every $100 you can save is pretty high. So like, the $200 gap between Scheffler and Rory, that actually does kind of matter to me now. And I think that's kind of the bigger takeaway for me is save everywhere you can to make it less difficult on yourself while still being in those tiers. I think that's also true for like HV3, Harold Varner III versus like a Finau. Maybe not versus the Hag, because I think that $500 actually does do decent bit of a difference there. But like, I want to save salary. And I would also say from a roster construction perspective, I would like to get back up to HV3 for my third golfer. If I have one lineup for single entry, I would like to have 2 in the top 6 plus HV3. That's going to leave me very strung out on the bottom end, but I think that's a worthwhile trade-off personally.
Yeah, I mean, this is always going to be a little bit field dependent, but it's probably better to lock in like a core of value plays in case they hit. Because if we're looking, like, let's just say we're trying to maximize the odds that a 6 of 6 lineup gets through. Let's say you have, I just did this quickly. I think the math's right here, but I'm an English major, so just bear in mind in case I do it wrong. But you should be able to, assuming this is all independent, but there's some interconnectedness here, because if one golfer makes the cut, another golfer in theory doesn't make the cut. But let's say you have 2 golfers in the value range with a 50% probability to make the cut, 2 more with 75%, and 2 more with 90%. The odds that all of those guys make the cut is about 11%. But let's say, okay, you're taking this stance that one of the 50% golfers does make the cut. That jumps up your lineup's probability to about, basically doubles it to like 22 or 23%. Whereas if you're locking in the studs and you're rotating in all the values, like you say, okay, I'm gonna roster Scotty Scheffler here at 90%. I'm gonna guarantee he makes the cut to 100%. Doesn't really impact your lineup probability overall, and you're still playing the guessing game a little bit more with the values. So again, this does depend on the field. But this week, even though there are no sort of real locks in the value range, I think I'm going locking in a smaller value player pool and rotating in the studs.
It's also just hard to define guys I like down there, and I think that influences it too. So that's where I'm at. Which golfers' odds have shifted most notably since things opened yesterday?
Well, Cam Smith 15-1 to 11-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook. Tyrrell Hatton 29-1 to 27-1, and then Harold Varner III 42-1 to 33-1. So I moved the needle personally on those 3 guys with my segment from yesterday. Adam Hadwin, the Canadian, 41.
Shaking in their boots. They are hacking into Brandon's laptop to get access to the Quick Picks Google Doc. It's like Google Sheets, so they know.
Yeah. I've been JT Burns, almost Cam last week. I would be, I'd be a little nervous too. Just like two borderline like favorites.
No, but they're still like Cam was 19-1. Like Burns was whatever. Like it doesn't matter if they're the
30.
favorites. It doesn't matter if they're the favorites. It's still long odds. So
yeah, but I mean, like I guess you can't knock like 16-1 odds on JT. If he wins, then nobody else wins, and then
or Joey Logano went to 16-1 at a gateway.
Adam Hadwin moved from 41 to 33, so I'm sure it's a lot of narrative related stuff there.
But do you think the Connors odds where they are also narrative related? Do you think that he deserves to be 20-1? Okay.
Partially, yeah. I think he and Hadwin get that partial bump. And then Chris Kirk, 50 to 45, our guy. So that's been it in terms of golfers whose odds have shortened. I think that if you talk to anyone building lineups this week, they're probably interested in those 5 names as sort of a baseline for the most part. So that's not really surprising. In terms of lengthening, just 3 that I noticed. JT 9-1 to 9.5 to 1, which is small, but again, only 3 golfers' odds have lengthened since I've pulled these numbers. Sam Burns 13 to 14 to 1, which again, very small, but I think noteworthy because he's now 14 and Cam Smith is 15. I thought that was more appropriate. And then Tony Finau 24 to 25. Again, very, very small, but probably means nobody's really betting him. And so if you want to get a little bit different, you can go Finau, but it's just not the route I'm choosing to go this week.
I'm good. Which lower salary golfers have odds to stand out to you?
So nobody below 9,000 on FanDuel in terms of their DFS salary has odds better than 110 to 1. Which is not particularly a good sign for upside from the value range. But again, maybe this is the kind of week where you're saying the top 5 or 6 have like 55% of the win equity. And I just need my value golfers to finish like top 15 or top 20 as opposed to trying to win. We're big fans of saying you want all 6 of your golfers to have the chance to win. The way that I'm viewing it is that the top is even more top heavy than the odds board implies. So that's the route I'm going. But with that in mind, the best odds to win on FanDuel Sportsbook among golfers with salaries of at least 9,500 or lower, we have Patrick Rogers, Cameron Champ, David Lipsky, Dylan Fratelli, Nick Hardy, and Matt Wallace all at 80 to 1. Emiliano Grillo is 95 to 1, and then a big tier at 110 to 1 with Aaron Rye. All right, Aaron Rye, JT Poston, Matthias Schwab, Steven Yeager, JJ Spawn, Nick Taylor, Danny Willett, Rory Sabatini, and Tyler Duncan, all 110 to 1. So again, not a whole lot of like mismatches with the odds and the salaries. So just keep that in mind for this week.
So JJ Spawn is a guy who initially caught my attention, but he did have a recent withdrawal. He withdrew from the Charles Schwab with a back injury. Does that cross him off your list, or is the fact that he's in the...
That's not what crosses him off the list for me. It's that this JJ Spawn.
Yeah, but everyone else in the 9,000 range is bad. Like I don't know. Like,
oh, Nick Taylor also Canadian.
Oh yeah, okay. But like, I need people.
Can you? Will you do a Matthias Schwab versus JJ Spawn?
No, I just asked you if I can trust the dude because his back's hurt. Having a hurt back in golf seems bad, man.
Yeah, it doesn't help me much when I go golfing.
I started to get like occasional like back stuff, and I feel old. I turned 30 last year in 2021, and I'm like, this is the beginning of the end. I feel you, JJ. JJ and I are basically the same person. That's my conclusion here. We're all the same. Weather for this week could be very gross, which is delightful because weather in Toronto will likely hit me in Syracuse. So thanks, guys. Going to be very wet Thursday morning. Not sure if they'll even be able to play, and it'll be soaking if they do. I hope for their case they don't. Winds will be around 10 miles per hour all day long. No rain Friday, but winds consistent at 10 miles per hour all day. It's potentially moist again over the weekend. So I wouldn't say tee time stacks are necessarily in play unless you think that they try to play through it and it gets really gross, which they could. So you could potentially stack tee times as a result of that. But I wouldn't be shocked if they get moved around. So like that makes it tougher.
I think with the chatter of some of the reasons that people might have wanted to leave the PGA Tour for a different opportunity was protection. So maybe these guys waited out and play in better conditions. So I would kind of lean that things get postponed until the conditions are nice and fresh.
I always say, if you want great weather, go to London. Definitely the first place I think of when I think great weather. Good choices, guys. But it's going to be bad weather this weekend. Potentially Thursday specifically. I'd check back on the weather forecast there to see how that impacts things. But yeah.
I mean, with the U.S. Open lurking, I wonder if some of these studs, if they're facing bad weather, if they're going to phone it in a little bit.
Don't put these bad vibes in the universe. Don't do this to me.
It's just a thought. It's just a thought.
Check
Cam
back
Smith's
on
not
weather.
going to care. Cam Smith's not going to care. He's going to play through it. He's going to try to win. So,
speaking of which, let's move on to our player picks here for the RBC Canadian Open. Brandon at the top. Who are you targeting on FanDuel for this week?
Cam Smith.
Wow, shocker! I had no idea.
So I think if we're going the route, if we're okay going the route of downplaying strokes gained off the tee, then Smith is probably the best golfer on the planet. If you just look at strokes gained fairway through green, he's the best golfer in this field over the past year with my recency and field strength adjustments. He is in the 55th percentile in adjusted strokes gained off the tee, but best in approach, 95th percentile or better in both of the short game stats. So I like that for Smith. 81st percentile scrambler. I think that's going to come into play, getting up and down, making those putts, watching him line up the ball with the line horizontal in front of him rather than helping him line it up. I don't know why he does it, but it's like the most baller move you could ever make. It's like, yeah, I have the line, but I don't need it. Like,
it works.
Why does he have it? Like, I don't know if he uses it off the tee maybe, but like he has it and then he just puts it in the front horizontally. And it's so sick though.
It works.
Yeah.
I also have Cam Smith as my one of my high salary guys, so I'll talk about him now. Obviously, the weekend this past week, disappointing for those of us who were financially interested in Cam Smith, but it's hard not to be back on him here. He mentioned we could downplay potentially driving. He should always be first on the list when that happens because he leads the field in approach the past 50 rounds, 8th around the green, 2nd in overall putting. And the short game was on last week too, so he lost 2 strokes off the tee. That that can happen for sure. He trails just Scheffler in true strokes gained, and I want as much access to this year as possible. I mentioned before I might rotate through studs. The one guy I might commit to is Smith just because he is towards the bottom end of that tier, and I don't think he should be. So maybe it's a commit to Cam Smith, rotate second stud, and then commit to some value plays. Maybe that's what I do for this week. Maybe it's commit to Smith and long, rotate through the rest. I don't know. I think there are routes doing it, but I like Cam Smith a lot. Who else do you like in this upper tier for this week?
I like Tyrrell Hatton. And then I want to get your thoughts on someone else after we finish up the high-end section. But Hatton is very similar to Cam Smith in the regard of like phenomenal golfer if you don't necessarily put a lot of emphasis on strokes gained off the tee. The big issue still is that neither of those guys are hyper accurate off the tee. And if it does prove very difficult if you're missing these fairways, then I just picked the wrong stat set. But based on what I know so far, I think we can just mitigate off the tee play a little bit. Look more for those guys who are going to get up and down, get out of trouble whenever they do inevitably get into trouble because of the greens being small. But if you look at strokes gained approach through putting, Hatton 99th percentile in this field over the past year, trailing only Cam Smith for me. 3 top 30s in his past 4 starts. Fantastic putter. I think he sets up really well for St. George's.
Yeah. I do like Hatton. I do like the salary savings. I think that for cash games, pretty intrigued by him for sure. Want to get a bit above him for tournaments. I initially had Scotty Scheffler as my other high salary guy outside of Cam Smith, but the more I think about it, the more I do value the $200 savings down to Rory McIlroy. So let's talk here about Rory as being the other stud I want to build around for this week. Rory leads the field in strokes gained off the tee. Obviously, that may not matter as much this week, but also 13th in approach, 17th around the green. He is 4th in bent grass putting the past 50 rounds. If you want to look at that split specifically, Rory has been pretty much lights out there. We know the form is on point as well. Rory's been playing really good golf. So I think the more I think about it, I do want the $200 savings, but I also would be okay with like a Cam Smith, Shane Lowry lineup as being like my start, just because it is the lowest salaried way to get 2 of those top 6 golfers in there. I think both those guys have legitimate shots to win this event. So I would say Smith is a guy I commit to, and I'm okay. We'll see with the rest of it. Who is the guy you were going to ask me about?
It was going to be Rory, but now it's going to be JT. I think process-wise, like stats-wise, JT is by far the best play this week.
Outside of Smith?
I like Smith more because of the savings, but if I had to pick one golfer just straight up, it would be JT. The reason I'm not higher on JT is just because he's coming off of the PGA Championship win and heading into another major. So I don't know like if he's going to be as engaged as he could be. But if you want someone who does everything well, it's JT. If you want someone who does everything well and has upside, like if you want someone who does everything well, the 3 guys that really come to mind are JT, Cantlay, and Xander. And if you want a guy who does everything well but has like true upside, that's JT. For me, it's more like the narrative situation where I don't know if he's going to bring everything he has this week. So we're but again, if we can't play them all unless we do just lock in the values and rotate through the studs. But someone's got to get the axe out of the top 5. Like you can have exposure to probably 4 of them if you're building enough lineups. But let's say Scheffler,
JT, honestly.
You think JT is the least likely?
And I love JT, like always. It's just I think that for the reasons you mentioned, we're like, is he going to be super locked in this week? Maybe. I mean, he could golf well without being super locked in. So like that's not necessarily, a 1-to-1 thing, but I would probably be most likely to lop him off, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think for me it's just Scheffler as the favorite and the highest salaried.
That's fair. Let's move to the mid-range. Who are you targeting there?
Chris Kirk. I think he's the guy under salaried below 10,000. If you look at that range specifically, so 10,000 or lower, nobody really messes with Kirk's spike week rate. He's got about 43% of his events over the past year where he puts forth an 85th percentile adjusted tee to green performance. The putter is a low upside proposition always, and that's the only thing holding him back. But he's got 97th percentile wedge play, good out of the sand as well. And you want to see that upside tee to green rather than the putting, because while putting doesn't necessarily, it's not random. And it's not to say that bad putters can just randomly lead fields all the time in strokes gained putting, but the tee to green game elevates the floor, elevates the ceiling. And if the putter is a little bit on, that's a good recipe. So for me, I'm going to have a hard time not being overexposed to Chris Kirk this week.
Same with me. Talked about him before, so I would just put my stamp of approval on him, but I'll talk about HV3. Now, HV3 is not really a mid-range play. He's 10-4, but like I do want to get in 3 guys of HV3 or higher in my tournament lineup. So let's talk about HV3 here and why he's on that list for me. He is another guy who benefits if we downplay off the tee play. He is 94th in strokes gained off the tee the past 50 rounds, but 6th in approach, 6th around the green, 34th in overall putting. Varner has gained at least 5 on approach twice in the past 5 measured events. He has had spike weeks with the short game too. I think he makes a lot of sense at 10-4. Where are you at an HV3 this week?
Yeah, I like him. As I mentioned, he was a win pick for me. I loved him at 42-1. Like him a little bit less or a lot less at 33-1. But it's a matter of I'm downplaying driving numbers this week, and that's the one big issue for Varner. Used to sort of be the putter, but now it's sort of the driver that's taken a step back, and that's fine for this week because he has the right game to play well. So I'm in on Varner for this week.
Who else do you like in the actual mid-range, non-HV3 edition?
Pat Perez on 9,600. We're both in on him this week. Not the highest upside golfer, TD Green. About 9.5% of his events over the past year have been an 85th percentile performance, but it's about 29% with the putter, and that's fine because nobody down here is going to be perfect. And if you exclude the off the tee player, which I'm looking at, he's a 94th percentile golfer over the past year. Love to see that. If the recipe ends up being hitting fairways, getting up and down, making some putts, that's something that Pat Perez can do.
I agree with you on Perez. 96, I think it makes a lot of sense just in that range. I'd like to avoid this range if I can. But like, let's say I already have Kirk in there and I have 96 left. I'll put Perez in there. I also don't mind David Lipsky at 94. I think that he's the second guy I'd consider. I'm not like super, super high on him, which is why, again, I don't like this tier. But like, again, if I need someone here to fill it out, also I could go with a Matt Fitzpatrick, David Lipsky, Luke Donald, Northwestern stack. That is the other option on the table. Don't shake your head. You know I'm right. I think that's the other route we have at our disposal for this week, but really it's Perez. If I can avoid this tier, sweet. Would love to. Potentially could avoid it by going at some value plays. So who are you looking at in terms of value for this week?
I like Matthias Schwab well enough at 9,000. He's got a particular weakness in his game. I don't know if you could figure out which one it is of the 4 strokes gain stats, but it's off the tee play.
Wow. Shocker. Given the rest of the tone of the rest of the podcast, this has come out of nowhere. Please explain yourself.
It's like whenever you have a win pick of a guy we never talked about. But he's got like okay irons, but really good short game. And that's enough for me this week. If he can just hit those fairways, hit about field average greens, and then get up and down or make those birdie putts whenever he does get them. I like that. And so for me, Matthias Schwab, kind of a borderline cash game play for me, not because I love him so much, but more because there's enough there for me to sort of plug him into like a more balanced lineup and feel okay with it. So that's kind of where I am with Schwab and the values, which is a cool band name, Schwab and the Values.
Schwab and the Values. Love it. Potentially on the bass in that band is Mark Hubbard. That sounds like a bassist name. So I'm going to go with him as my top low salary guy. Hubbard gets a lot of action in the Korn Ferry Tour, but as you've shown, the Korn Ferry Tour pretty equivalent to like the Euro Tour in terms of competitiveness. So good finishes there do still matter. And Hubbard has been at least decent in the PGA Tour when he's played here. He was 52nd at the Charles Schwab, 32nd at the Byron Nelson, 51st at the Mexico Open. And that's without being good off the tee. He ranked 16th in approach, 18th around the green, 36th in overall putting the past 50 PGA Tour rounds. I think this could be a spot to be in on Hubbard and potentially get a bit more upside than he typically has. So I like Hubbard at 87. Looks like he is in your player picks as well.
Yep. I think he Long and Schwab kind of like the best value plays for this week. He's got good irons and he's a good scrambler and like out of the sand. So I'm cool with that. You mentioned the Korn Ferry stuff, but it's doable if you adjust his performance, which I do personally, but Data Golf also does a really good job of that. So if you use Data Golf's like true strokes gain query stuff, like you'll get a good idea of how to account for golfers who don't play every round on the PGA Tour. But yeah, Hubbard for me. And then one other name I'll just kind of throw out there while we're talking. Wesley Bryan, 8,100.
This is a name I've not heard in a very long time. Yeah, I love it.
Just like good golfer, just not off the tee. And if that's the route I'm going, if I'm okay just sort of playing some value plays who I don't think a value play is going to win this week. Like I think it's going to be someone at least in like the 96 and above range, which is not like a hot take, but some weeks you don't know who's going to win. Some weeks you kind of know. Yeah. So I'm not looking for a win. I'm looking for a mid cut with like top 30 upside, top 25 upside. And for the salary for Wesley Bryan at 81, I think that could work out.
I do too. Adam Long was my second player pick. We've talked a lot about him, but the reasoning just being he's a legitimate PGA Tour player, and that's kind of hard to find down here in this range for this week. Decent short game, not the best, but like decent. good approach overall, or goodish approach overall for this range. So I do like long at 86. Probably my favorite value play this week, with Hubbard being number 2 there, and Schwab I definitely think makes a lot of sense at 9,000 as well. Let's finish up with our picks to win for this week based on the odds over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Before you talk, I want to lock in Shane Lowry at 18-1. He's the one guy I feel best about at their current odds. So give me Shane Lowry at 18-1. Who else do you like?
Yeah, I mean, I won the most recent bobble hat, but it's cool that you get to pick first and then put the pressure on.
I had a good week last week in DFS, and you weren't here. So yeah. I chose not to enter a lineup, so I couldn't clown you and beat you by 600. But okay, I like, again, my 3 sort of main picks this week have been Cam Smith, Hatton, and Varner, but they've all had their odds shortened. I'm going to go, and Lowry was 4th on that list, so I'm very interested in him. But I will start off with Taylor Hatton. I still like the odds at 27-1. Okay. Second one for me is HV3, 33-1. I like the non off the tee numbers. And we know that, like, he hasn't done it recently, but, like, there is good off the tee play somewhere deep in Harold Varner III's soul. And if he could tap back into that, could have an upside showing. So I'll go Shane Lowry and Harold Varner III. Shane Lowry 18-1. HV3 33-1 to win for this week.
My instinct says to stick with Cam Smith. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Can I change from HV3 to Rory?
No.
I meant to do that.
No.
I forgot
you can do it. I don't care, man.
I care deeply. I would say.
I mean, you need to make up some ground, so you might want to stick with HV3 though.
No, this is value. This is not to win the game. I want to give good bets that I think that I don't know if HV3 can beat all these dudes at 33-1. Yeah, like 42, cool. 33, a bit tougher. So I'm going Rory and Lowry. You had Burns as your win pick when he won, right?
I did.
Terrible. He was like 30.
He was 29.
Brutal. Just rough stuff. I was convinced that I had him, and I listened back to the podcast. Like, I think I had Sam Burns and I had Berger. Like a dummy.
You did.
I did. He finished 23rd. He was fine.
And Cam Tringale.
He missed the cut by like 16. It was great. Yeah. Fun stuff.
Also, if you're doing your Northwestern lineup, Dylan Wu.
Oh. Okay. What's his salary?
It's only 4, but.
Dylan Wu. Okay. So we got Dylan Wu, Luke Donald, David Lipsky, Matt Fitzpatrick. Should I use our head-to-head?
Yeah, you should.
I'm going to. Okay. This has been locked in. So it shall be said, so it shall be done, as are we done with the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast for this week. As always, make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. We have not just PGA podcasts, but also MLB podcasts every weekday, UFC, NASCAR, all in the same place. So hit subscribe, and if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Brandon, any final thoughts for the good people before we send them off to fill out their lineups for the RBC Heritage Open or the RBC Canadian Open? The RBCs are all everywhere. Also, yeah, never mind. There was, yeah.
Okay.
Unlike Dustin Johnson, I will not ignore the RBC this week.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's not the most exciting field after the top 10 or so, but these are the types of fields where you can really get a leg up if you dig in. Really think about the lineup construction. I think lineup construction is going to dominate this week.
That is the key thing for me as well. So think long and hard about being in the right tiers, living in the right tiers, whatever you got to do to get there. I think that's the key thing for this week. If people have questions for you on Twitter, Brandon, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I'm on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for this week. Good luck to you, your PGA DFS lineups. We'll talk to you once again next week for another major. Should be a fun time. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.